Well, we're back in rows this week. I hope that is okay for your sitting pleasure. And I know that week one of this series, in case you're wondering and you're like, Josh, what does that even mean? Last week we sat around tables to emphasize the importance of life being better in circles than in rows. And so we had tables, we had our small group Sunday, and I hope you enjoyed it. Anybody out there enjoy that? Yeah, you're wondering. You might be here for the first time and you're wondering, why does everyone clap so much? We just love clapping at Center Church. We just love clapping. But we're jumping into week 2 here. And my name's Josh. I'm the lead pastor here at Center Church. And I want to welcome you. And I hope you have a fantastic morning. And we're going to be talking about in week 2, one of our values. And every week at Center Church over the month of November, we're talking about our values. That's why last week we talked about life being better in circles than in rows, because our values, one of our values is authentic community, sitting together in circles and small groups. We've had the largest small group semester that we've ever had. We've seen amazing traction with that. Houses full. And this is a good problem, right? How good is that? That people want to sit together. And just somebody this morning was like, Josh, we're having so much fun. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. We're having fun just talking about Jesus. And I'm like, how amazing is that sentence, right? What do you mean Jesus can be fun? Anybody with me? Oh man, it's going to be one of those. Guess what? The sun came out. I walked down the halls, the sun came out. Okay. And so your attitudes have to reflect that. Okay. Are you out there this morning? Yeah, you just, okay. Depends what week. Some weeks a little bit more charismatic, some a little less. Okay. Got it. Life is like cheddar cheese. And I mean that with all my heart. The way that we spend our life and what we do with our resources will get moldy and we have to toss it away. Or it slowly depreciates. Or else we use it and we exhaust it and we get to enjoy it. I went to the fridge this week and I had to make macaroni and cheese. You need 4 cups of cheddar cheese. I had 4 cups of cheddar cheese, but the block of cheese that was sitting in the back of the drawer had a few green spots on it. And I cut away. Yeah, you just cut away the green spots. The cheese is still good, right? You got more response there than anything else we've done so far. So I cut the green spots away, but I was sure that I was never going to eat that cheese. Anybody with me? Unless you're super weird, okay? Then I don't know. But I'm never going to eat those spots. But I just realized as I was prepping for today's message that that's like our financial situation. Is that we only have so much time to use the resources that we have. And if we don't use them in the time that we have them, they grow moldy, the window closes, the opportunity closes, and they get thrown away. We can pass them on, and I know some people like multi-billionaires like Warren Buffett give away 99% of their wealth at the end of their life. But for the average person, for those who are average in Canada, we have an opportunity with our finances to make a difference and to reorient ourselves so that we don't end up living our life like cheese, where at the end of our life, we kept all that we had. We hoarded what we had. We didn't use what we had. It grew bad, and then it was thrown away. And this is what we want to confront today. And there's an interesting character in the New Testament. If you've never read the Bible's broken down into books, chapters, and verses. And in the New Testament, there's a character named James. Now, James is a curious figure. James is curious for a number of different reasons. The first is he's the half-brother of Jesus. Okay, and so that's curious in and of itself. But then more than that, he is the leader of the church in Jerusalem. Okay, and so not only is he the half-brother of Jesus, but he's the leader of this church in Jerusalem. What would you have to do? Like, what would your brother have to do to convince you that he's the son of the living God? Anybody in this room? He grew up with this guy. One of the greatest evidence of the Christian faith is James, because James was wholly convinced as his brother that this truly was the Son of God. James begins to lead the church of Jerusalem, and the church of Jerusalem comes under intense attack, like really intense attack. And James writes this letter in the New Testament to a church under attack, to a church under scrutiny that is coming to Jesus, but with crowds and throngs of people are coming to the message of Jesus, but they're under incredible scrutiny and they're under attack and people are losing their businesses and Christians are being enslaved. And so James writes this letter to the surrounding churches. And so today we're going to dive right into the text. But before we do that, I want to say this. This is what the message is on today. If we can get this on the screen. And if you got taking notes, you can write this down. But we need to give now while you live, while you can, within your window. You need to give now while you live, while you can, within your window. And this is not Pastor Josh Louve's message. This is not just this is Center Church's message. This is the message that James, the brother of Jesus, screams at the church because he understands that in the time that we live, we only have a certain amount of opportunity. And I don't know about you, but I'm a little bit of a go-getter. I'm a bit of a driven guy. I want to seize the window of opportunity. And so all of our lives, all of us are here and we have a purpose and we have an opportunity. And so James is speaking to the church then, but I believe it's equally as applicable to the church now. So we're going to jump into the text. I know your heart is ready for this. And so you were quiet before and now you're going to be really quiet. We're going to jump into the text and then maybe you'll lighten up a little bit. Okay. James 5 verse 1. Now listen, you rich people. Now, when I say that, most of you self-eliminated yourself. Most say this text then isn't for me. We often don't think about this, but we are better off than we think we are. We don't feel rich, so you don't think you're rich. We do so much of our faith on feeling, don't we? Culturally, it doesn't even matter what the truth means anymore. If you feel something, and I'm not speaking on things like, I'm not going to speak into climate change as a political issue right now, but seriously, it's like the running joke, right? If it's cold outside, it's like, yeah, see, climate change isn't real, right? This is what happens because it's cold outside. Anybody? No? Okay. And then it gets hot. It's like, see, it's real. It's real. It's like, and this is how people live based on feeling. I feel cold. I feel warm. So it must then be true or it must not be true. Feelings. But what does the evidence tell us? The evidence tells us that for most of us, we are in the 1% of the world. But let's get to there in just a minute. I want to jump back onto the screen. There's a few reasons we don't feel rich, and this is why. Let's put the first one on the screen. Is we know what everybody else has. And so this is like the gift and the curse of Instagram, right? You know who has the new car, right? You know who got the new thing when they got it. You know who went on the latest trip. You know who went you went to the hockey game, or you know who got that new guitar, or you know who got that beautiful handbag. Oh my goodness. You know who got the matching clothes, or you know who has the guy's room, you know who has the big TV, you know who has it, because we know what everyone else has and we see it all the time. I mean, you can't even go on Facebook anymore and not see the thing you looked at last, right? Like it's just always in your face. And so you don't feel rich because you know what everyone else has. But there's another reason that leads to something else, especially with the Instagram culture. It leads to the comparison trap. And what the comparison trap is this, is that at once we used to envy somebody that was ahead of us. And so what we did was we increased our living style to match the person ahead of us. But then we realized it was unsatisfying. And so what we did was rather than say, you know what, I don't need any more, we went, well, who's now ahead of me again? Okay. And so we look, oh, that person's ahead of me. And then we try to achieve. And the comparison trap, the problem is we keep elevating our living, and it usually goes along with our income, but we keep elevating our living, and it keeps leaving us emptier and emptier and emptier and emptier. And we think that at some point we're going to reach a point where it fulfills us, but it doesn't. That's the comparison trap. And it's fed by the fact that we know what everyone else has. I mean, my lawn is so bad right now. I raked the leaves. I was all proud of it, right? And then my neighbor came out with a leaf blower. I don't have a leaf blower. Anyone have a leaf blower in here? Yeah, he one-upped me. Just 40 seconds, he's done. Smiled at me, gave me the wink like Mr. Clean, right? He gave me the little wink and then he was done. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to let my dog poop on your lawn. And you see how that goes. But we all know what everyone else has. And then it leads to the comparison trap. But then the third thing is this. That we have no financial margin. So because we keep increasing our standard of living, and we keep increasing the activities that our kids are in, we keep increasing, We have no financial margin, and therefore, when we don't have financial margin, we don't have peace. And this is the part that we don't feel. So we feel these things, but here's what we don't feel. We don't feel the fact that for most of us, we're in the 1% of the world. And we don't feel that because we don't really travel around the world much. So usually when you vacation, you're not like, you know what, I'm going to go to a third world country just to see what it feels like for me to feel what somebody else feels in poverty. Right? But if you make an income, and this is a combined income of over $43,650, you are in the 1% of the world. Even if you don't feel rich, the truth is that billions of people consider you rich. When you have change in your car that you forgot about, when you have stacked up iPhones or iPads or tablets, you're rich. And so as James begins this picture, putting the picture in place, in the first century, can we get that up on the screen again? In the first century, don't read ahead, but okay. But now listen, you rich people, what most pagan religions and the Jewish religion would have told them was this. They would have said, you know what, because somebody's rich, God must be blessing them. The provision is because of their financial gain. And so most Jews would have thought this, most pagan religions would have thought this, and even this has crept into the church recently. But we know that from the very beginning in Genesis 1, that God blessed the creation despite what we did. God just continues to keep blessing and blessing. But here's the deal, the New Testament flips that whole idea on its head. Flips the whole idea on its head, and this is how it flips it, that rich people are not more favored, rich people are more accountable. Rich people are more responsible for what we have. And God is not going to ask you for how much you made, but he is going to ask you for how you lived. And then James will continue on this path. And I know this is intense, and you're going to keep going here, and you're going to keep loving it. You're going to keep laughing. Let's get James 5 on the screen. And you still with me this morning? Yeah, okay, great. James 5, let's get verse 2 on the screen. Verse 1, sorry, thank you. It says this in verse 1. Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming on you. Oh my goodness. Josh, I came to church today to get encouraged. But this is the encouragement, is that as we reorient ourselves around God's picture of how we live, we find peace and we find happiness and we find joy. The poor never make the mistake of putting their trust in wealth because they don't have it. Many people spend more emotional and intellectual energy on worrying about losing their money than about how they can bless others with their money. They're worried about financial future and money in the bank. They check their accounts every day. They look at bank accounts, property values, increase in thinking. And the change here is we, and I'm going to include myself in this category, it's easy to get into look what I got, look what I built. And we can easily spend our life in scarcity, looking at all the opportunities we have and all the things that we don't yet have, rather than stepping into the abundant life that God has called us to. If we're Christians, then God has told us, and we read even in Jesus' word, that God takes care of the flowers and the grass and the birds. Surely he'll take care of you too. And so if you're like, well, Josh, let's spend more time on worry. I can't today, but I want to say this. Last year, I taught a series about how to break that worry cycle. And so if you want to go back and listen to that, you can totally go do that. But don't spend your emotional energy on wondering what you're going to lose. Because this is what he's saying, weep and wail because of the misery that's coming on you. What's the misery? Of having more, you become accountable for more. And when you can easily fall into the trap of lose, 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 when God is like, I have put this into your life. I've put these resources in your life to bless the family around you, the world around you, and the kingdom of God that is presently around you. And he wants us to put up energy into that. But James knows that too many people spend their time worrying and get themselves in misery as a result of what they have and fear of loss. Now, it just keeps getting better and better. James 5, verse 2. Are you ready for this? Hold your breath. Here we go. Your wealth has rotted rotted you, and moths have eaten your clothes. This sounds like bad news. Has anyone ever had moth eat their clothes? I haven't. I can't connect with that one. But basically, this is what James is saying. You have hoarded your wealth, and all those things are not good for anything or to anybody. Man, people keep giving me interesting gifts. Now, people know I'm a Star Wars guy. Any Star Wars fans out there? True Star Wars fans wouldn't cheer. No, I'm kidding. But I keep getting these mini portable speakers. Like I have that was my mother-in-law. She knows where this is going. And I got one, Ruby has one with LED lights on the front. I got one that's a Darth Vader. I got a longer one. And it's just like, I got this whole collection of portable speakers. And we don't use them unless we do a Halloween outreach for Center Church. And then they're like, do you have a portable speaker? I'm like, yes, I do. Yes, I have many, right? I have many. But it was amazing to me when my phone conked out a little while ago. And I just told a few people in the office, I was like, oh yeah, my phone conked out. And they're like, oh yeah, I got extras. I was like, what? Yeah. Oh, I got extra iPhones. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then I began to listen. I'd tell people, oh, my cell phone conked out. Yeah, I got an extra one if you need it. I got an extra one. And that's what the writer is getting to here. Is there's some things in our life that we hold on to. And we tell ourselves it's for a rainy day. We tell ourselves it's for one day. But God's like, would you release it out of your hand? And if you don't start releasing things out of your hand, it starts to rot. And it doesn't just, the item itself, as we'll see in the next verse, it begins to get worse and worse and worse, and eventually it depreciates to the point where it's not good for anybody. What comes in, I want to say this, Center Church, what comes in is never the issue. Like I want to say this, and I want you to know this. The New Testament says, make as much money as you possibly can. Like work hard, make money, be prosperous. There's no issue, prosperous. I added a T, what? Be prosperous, like work hard. It actually says to do your work as unto the Lord. You need to go on the job site or you need to go into work like it's not just your boss watching. Like God's watching and seeing how you steward what you have. I didn't start pastoring on a platform. Do you know where I started pastoring? Setting up chairs. As this skinny, scrawny little guy at Center Church. That's where we are now. Let me reorient myself. Okay, but at Relate Church, I started as a very skinny, scrawny guy. I remember there's this guy, Marvin McGee, legend. Okay, he was the best man at my wedding. And he picked me up. I remember one day I was running late and he knocked on the glass of my window. He's like, are you in there? I'm like, oh no, And so I rush outside. My hair is all disheveled. And he used to bring me out and bring me to church every Sunday. And I started stacking chairs. It was on my heart to produce music. I wanted to pastor one day. I wanted to write one day. I wanted to do all that stuff. Nobody saw it. I was just setting up chairs every Sunday morning and going to some leadership meetings. And you know what? Chairs eventually grew into worship team opportunities. I started when I was 17, just around the church, started getting involved with youth. By the time I was 20, I got to produce my first album there at Center Church. That began to grow. And it eventually led to me leading the music team there, that led to small group ministry, that led to preaching on the weekend. And every single step was based on faithfulness. And I just want to say, Center Church, it just gets me so jacked and excited to see so many people going back to school. It gets me so excited for people to be preparing themselves for the next step. And I'm just going to say, for some of you, I want to just give some encouragement. For some of you, you're seizing the day, you're taking the opportunity, and God is seeing what you do in private, and he's going to use that for public influence. And just saying, as you hustle, as you work hard, that God continues to grow you in your influence, God continues to grow in your wealth. But again, if we hoard what we have, it rots. We have to use what we have today. And so whether it's an iPhone that's sitting around or whether it's an opportunity for us to bless somebody with our resources or a talent or our time, we need to invest that. The issue is not what comes in, the issue is how much stacks up. James leans in and says this. Look at this, and these ones just hit my heart this week. Your gold and your silver are corroded, and their corrosion will testify against you. And the things you don't use, Those things that we just hold on to, those opportunities that we don't leverage, that stuff that we have that we could give, the things that we hoard, they will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. That's intense. Whoa. Public judgment in the first century was public and it was violent. All judgment was public and violent. And so James is saying here that there will be a day that comes, and I want to circle back to that moment, because he's talking specifically to people in the church, and the church was suffering intensely, and there was people in the church that could have softened the blow had they been willing to let go of what was in their hand. And I'm not just talking about money here. It has a big part to do with money, but it also has to do with our time. Like, what wisdom do you have that you could save people like weeks and weeks or months and months of just fighting through a certain idea? Or do you have money that you could give to somebody? And if you think that this is just a big, long money grab for 30 minutes so Center Church can hit some budget line, you're wrong. Give somewhere else if it's not here. But give your money, give your time, give it away. Because if we hoard, God at some point is going to say, what did you do with what I gave you? It's not how much comes in, it's how much stacks up. And it's about not letting things stack up. And so we need to make sure that we're ahead of that. But again, it was about this judgment. In ancient times, it was public and it was violent. James assumes that God's judgment is real and that each person will be accountable for what we have. He then states it plainly. Look at this next part of the verse here. It's going to jump on the screen. I know it. Touch screen there. Look at that. You have hoarded wealth in your last days. Last days means that Jesus has come. We're stepping into a time where he says, and he uses this analogy for those of you that are new to church. Let me help you just a little bit, okay? He says the fields are white with harvest. Workers are few. But here's what he's saying. There's an opportunity now to make a change. It's not one day we'll wait for revival in the church. It's not one day we'll wait until the heartstrings pull. It's not one day until I send out that invitation. It's not one day, it's now, because the last days. We're coming, Jesus will come back, and it will be a grand entrance, and there'll be a lot that we get to look forward to, but we are in our last days. So why hoard all we have when we have an opportunity to make a difference now for eternity? That is what he's saying. Why hoard when your time is short? While your life is short and Jesus will one day return, why hoard? Have you ever had to clean out somebody's house after they've passed away and you're like, what did this person do with all this stuff? Let us not be those people. Anybody with me? There's a pastor in the UK that died with a silver spoon. That was the last thing he had. He learned how to give his wealth all the way to the end of his life till the last thing he had was just a spoon. What are we aspiring to? What kingdom culture are we creating? What are we doing at Center Church that sets us apart? What is it that we do? I can tell you that it's something as little as throughout the week, I'm sitting in my office and there's days that I'm like discouraged because I have to preach every week and it's hard. I come up with a thing to talk about the scripture, and then everyone just critiques it after I'm done. It's like, wow, let's just do that every week. Let's plant a church. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, and so we went. But I was sitting in my office one day, and an unlikely person just texted me encouragement. Said, I wasn't there on Sunday, Josh, but I was thinking and praying about you. I'm just texting you encouragement today. It's just that small action to prefer one over another, to prefer another over yourself. Because life is short and it will end. And we can either consume all that we have or we can use it to benefit others. Most of us will run out of time, but we will never run out of stuff. Wouldn't it be amazing to go out with no money? Like, wouldn't it be amazing to do that? Like, what's the alternative? We have a ton of money and property and what? What? Now, I'm not against retirement, okay? Do you all hear me? I'm not against financial margin. I'm not against those things. I'm not saying it's a for or against scenario, but I have no problem with people passing stuff off to their children either. There's no issue with any of that. But the question is always this, is what is the target that you're shooting for? Like at the end of your life, what do you want people to say about you? Because what we do now will determine the story that those around you tell. As my kids watch me, well, they see a generous man who loved Jesus. Now, I knew somebody's going to laugh at me when I say this. I bought a dog this week, okay? A friend of mine said, impulse buy. Maybe. I looked at my daughter this week. She looked at me. And I get kind of tired of Christmas presents, I'm not going to lie. I just feel like I clean out my drawers to put more toys in them. And one of my daughters looked at me and she said, Daddy, I want a pet so bad. I know when your kids look at you a certain way, parents, you're just like, oh, this is killing my heart. And so we bought a dog. And I just want to say something about that, is it comes at a personal cost. I have to sleep beside the dog's kennel at night so it doesn't scream all night. I have to take it out to do pee breaks, and I thought we were out of diapers as a family. Here we go again, pee training. Comes at time, energy. But I turned to Destiny and I said, I'm tired of making decisions out of just my own personal comfort. It's time that I need to start making decisions for my family and for you and for our church that put me in places of discomfort. And so, I know it's a dog, all right? But when was the last time we let the voices of those around us, their voices ring in our ears? Because what we determine now, our kids are looking at us. For me, the church is looking at me. For you, your neighbors are looking at you. How are you loving? How are you caring for those around you? And this is what it says next in the verses. And I know you're finding so much encouragement in these verses today. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. There's these cries that are resonating throughout the world that we have an opportunity to make a difference and to lean into. And in this particular situation in the text, James is talking to landowners who are not paying their workers fair wages because they legally don't have to. And I just want to say a moment that just because a loophole is possible and is legal doesn't mean that it's always good. And that's what James is getting to. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. God in heaven is watching and you're responsible. Cutting corners is not the way of God. Those in Jerusalem had legally taken advantage of the less advantaged. Resource people should look not for opportunities to do less, but for opportunities to do more. And if all there is in this life is I don't need anybody or anything, and I don't take care of anybody or anything because I just take care of myself and I earned every penny that I own, which is an agnostic and an atheist worldview to say that all the resources that I have earned are my own, then you have no responsibility. But if we are going to live out the things that Jesus has called us to do, then for those of you that call yourself Christians, that you're devoted to Jesus and his teachings, we must learn this truth, that you're not an owner, you're a manager and a steward. You're money managers. According to Jesus, he commends you for working hard, and I want to commend you for working hard. I know many of my friends that we have conversations with, or many people at the church, you work hard, and I love that. I love that Center Church, that there's people here that don't just slough things off, but work hard. Side hustles, right? Leveraging the morning hours and the evening hours. Passion projects that don't just wait, but are taking advantage of the opportunities ahead of them, that are taking strides. You're working hard, and I want to commend you for that. But know this, you are also responsible. You have lived on earth, and this is what it says next. You have lived on earth in wealth and you have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourself up in the day of slaughter. And what James is saying here again, James is saying here, meaning that you've accumulated more and more, but one day it'll all be over and we'll have to give an account for what we've done. All the hoarding, the saving, and the fattening yourself up for slaughter, he says at one point, you're going to have this open hand. Now hear me, I'm not again against margin or saving for retirement or taking care of yourself or taking care of your family. Those are all great things. But what does it all lead to, and why are you doing it all? At some point it can change from just making sure that you're okay to just looking out for oneself. What's interesting about this particular text, and here's where I'm going to end today, is James was martyred for his faith in Jerusalem. It was illegal. They didn't care, but they martyred him. 5 years later, after he wrote this letter to the church in Jerusalem, Rome came in, and there was already Roman rule. But every single person in Jerusalem was enslaved, killed, or taken away to another country. And everyone, in particular the wealthiest that he wrote these letters to, lost absolutely everything. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to be the case with us. But sometimes we think that we'll have an opportunity down the road. Just when I get to that next level, then it's the time. When my income gets to this level, then I'll be generous. When I have a little bit more margin in my life, then. And I'm telling you, for those that, and I just want to commend you, Center Church, because many of you have done this. And I love that you are around my family and you're around people in our church because you've gone above and beyond. But I want to remind you of what I said before. Thinking about James's teaching, this is what it says in the very beginning. If I can get those words up, the give now slate. Is James reminds us of this idea that I said at the very beginning. If I could get that up, that would be awesome. All right, I'm just going to give up on that. But we need to give now. Give now. While you live, while you can, within your window. This is what we do, Center Church. We give now, while we live, while we can, within our window. I can't control my health. I can't control the opportunity. I can only do what God has required of me today. And God has required for me to take care of those around me. God has required for me to be generous. God has required of me in my gifting, in my skill set, to invest that in the kingdom of God. And it is hard at times. There's times that I'm like, surely God, you could have called me into business, but he called me into ministry. Surely I wish I could make that salary, but God, you've called me to this one. God, I have this intelligence. I feel like I have this skill set, and he redirects me back to ministry. And I'm like, God, I won't be able to accomplish these things. And he's like, I don't care. You're going to accomplish the purpose that I've called you to accomplish. And you know what? In all of that, I found more joy than I thought I would ever find. I found deeper and more meaningful relationships that I thought I would ever find. And God, through it all, has blessed us incredibly. And I just want to say today that we might think that we're losing something, but we gain so much as we live a life of sacrifice, as we live a life of diligence, as we live for those around us. Let's be the church who gives now. And while we live, while we can, within our window, we give. And this might be financially. In the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about serving. And we're going to talk about some other things within the values, the framework, within our values and the framework of Center Church. But today, let this not just be a one-off. Let us live a life of growing generosity. Growing generosity.